Welcome back to Grinding to a Halt. This is another deeply surreal episode for me. I am speaking with Jack O'Brien. He was the founder and former editor-in-chief of Cracked, which is massive, massive influence on me for a very long time. It shaped a lot of the way that I thought about humor, the way I approached analysis of film and television, and it has also branched off into majority of the content that I take in online, whether that be podcast, video essays. A lot of the books that I read are from people that were at Cracked while he was in charge over there. He has, for the last 7 years, been the co-host of the Daily Zeitgeist, which is a show that I have listened to every single day for 7 years. So I have literally spent thousands and thousands of hours listening to Jack talk. Overall, huge influence on the way I think about things, the way I approach things. This podcast exists because of the Daily Zeitgeist and Zeitgang, the listeners of that show, and the community that has really been built around it. So, super weird, if I'm being honest, talking to him. And as I was going through this episode and making my edits and pulling out clips, I would say it's the most insecure I have felt about an episode and the most nervous I have been up until this point going in to speaking with someone. He may not be a well-known name for a lot of people, but for me and my friends and for a lot of people that I talk to regularly, Jack is a very big deal. So yeah, strange, very, very strange. Jack is awesome. We talk about how he transitioned from working at ABC News into founding Cracked, kind of that sweet spot that they were in of being the website version of what the company thought was going to be a popular magazine reinvention. The magazine kind of fell away and the website became this massive, massive culturally influential thing. But in those early days, they didn't really know what to do with it, so he really got to build out something special. So it was really fun talking about that, talking about how he maintains his own sanity and mental health while talking about the news every single day. This guy puts out like 12 podcasts a week. It is unbelievable the amount of content they create. 2 episodes a day, most days during the week. They do a weekly recap episode. He hosts another show called Mild and Jack Got Mad Boosties, which is an NBA podcast. So highly recommend following Jack. He is Jack_O'Brien on all the socials. Follow the Daily Zeitgeist. Check out Miles and Jack Got Mad Boosties. Yeah, great conversation. Great guy. I'm very appreciative of him giving me so much of his time when he doesn't know who I am or what this podcast is. So greatly appreciate him being all in and jumping on a call with me. In preparation, I thought it would be fun for me to go back and listen to the first episode of TDZ.
Oh no.
Just to like track the progress of where
Yeah.
the show was, 2017 to now. Vastly different show. I listened to it last night and I was
Oh
like,
my God.
it feels weird. It's like a very strange time capsule. The world was so different. But obviously the structure of the show is the same. But there's even an element where, and it's funny that you talk about like Havana syndrome in episode 1.
We do?
Yeah, which has been
Man, this
a
I have
through line.
no idea what we talked about in episode 1. Like
It was
that's
it was
yeah.
very Havana syndrome heavy, but also you have like a professor come in and you talk to him about like conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And I was like, it's weird that that's something that has come back around, and now Tuesday episodes are like expert episodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's fun to watch that, but no singing up top, which is strange to go back to an episode and be like, oh, it's just like a normal show. It
Yeah.
hasn't become insane yet.
Hasn't gone completely off the rails yet.
But to not make it too awkward, but do something I must do at the up top. I had Alex Goldman on from Reply All. It's like my second or third episode. And I told him, I was like, you guys were the second podcast I ever listened to. So, like, it's a very strange experience to be talking to you. But Cracked was my intro to podcasting.
All right.
The Cracked podcast was the first show I ever listened to. It's been weird that that was my intro. Obviously, all of my friends and I read Cracked. I'm 34. So, like, we're
Oh yeah.
nerds.
Sweet
That
spot.
it was perfect for us.
You're the
Absolutely
sweet spot of
perfect.
people who have heard of Cracked when they're like, oh, ask me what I do for a living and then ask follow-up questions. And I'm like, well, I worked on this website Cracked, and 98% of the time it's blank stares. But there's that one age group where they're like, oh my God, Cracked. I read that instead of doing my homework in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was us. It was
Yeah.
Cracked articles, and then as things moved into video content, obviously we naturally shifted towards that. So it's been fun to watch your career going from that over to the How Stuff Works network, into that becoming iHeart, and developing everything you do. But like we were talking about before the record started, this podcast only exists because of TDZ. So like through that community that you guys have built, which is like the best group of people I know
Yeah.
online. Like it's
Right?
it's unbelievable how kind
God.
everybody is.
It's so cool. It really is. Like we're just always that's rarely, I don't know. So some of my favorite podcasters, like you'll hear them kind of curdle as they like get to meet their
Yeah,
listeners and just be like, get angry at their listeners. And it's fun because it's a source of like comedy for them because
yeah,
then they get to like make fun of their listeners. And like that is not a luxury we have. Unfortunately, our listeners rule and are like really funny. And it's like, so we just have to be like, yeah, our listeners are actually cool. And the comedians who come on and who like our listeners go and see their show, they're like, man, your listeners are really cool, which comedians don't like anyone. We
yeah,
just have like the one group of listeners that are like just even comedians like
yeah.
it's a great group.
No, it's been great. Like everybody's super supportive. Everybody in Zeitgang, anytime somebody launches a project, like everybody just goes and supports it without question. Uh, like so meeting Will, Christy Yamaguchi main
Mm.
through Twitter, through Zeitgang, like him pitching me the idea of a podcast, and then it kind of naturally growing, and then me shifting over and doing this while he and I are working out ideas. Uh, it's been really exciting, but it all kind of stems back to Zeitgang being such a cool group of people. And like you said, comedians. When I was in LA over the summer, and Blair Saki was running her special at a theater over there, and I was like, well, obviously I got to go support. Like I got to go
Yeah.
do the show. And like there were people after the show that were just saying Zeitgang to her, and she would just say Zeitgang back, and that was it. That was the interaction.
And also, I should say, our listeners are really kind, really good people, not very eloquent. They just scream Zeitgang at
Yeah.
each other. No, that's not true. But that's funny. I do love to hear it. That's cool. And Blair is amazing, obviously.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah,
And that special is
so
so
great.
good. It's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah.
But all right, I had to gush a little up top.
I
So
appreciate the gushage.
so apologies for that. To shift into you, kind of your background, what you're doing now, and just the how do you manage the pure misery of talking about the news all day, every day?
Yeah,
Um, so you started at ABC, but what was the shift of going from ABC into not only comedy, but then to launching Cracked? How did that transition
yeah.
happen? Because it doesn't seem like a normal move that someone would make.
Yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a philosophy major. In college, I knew that I wanted to write. I did not know what I wanted to write exactly. I just knew that I really like enjoyed writing. So I was like writing comedy articles for like a small website that my friend and I had started called Kill the Widow. And then like some of that stuff would get picked up by like College Humor or like, other humor places. This was when I was a pool boy at the Soho House. That was my first job out of college, was being a pool boy. Um, because my friend worked at like the very first Soho house that had like come over from London to New York. She was like a worked the front desk, got me a job as a pool boy despite me having absolutely no experience at that. Steadily worked my way up to being a waiter. Was that lasted like 2 weeks. I was the worst waiter of all time, just like shaky hands, as has been explored on TDZ. Just have like shaky hands, very sweaty, social anxiety, which was especially bad in my early 20s. And so like going out and meeting new people for a living, like every time someone sat down at a table
Yeah.
was not great, not ideal for me. Um, and then they like kind of hid me as like a concierge, which they called a butler. And so I'd do that, go home, try and write something. Didn't really know what I was writing. Like I wrote a couple short stories that got published on like websites that I think had, one of those view counters that was like in the
Yeah.
teens. Um, like it
That's
was like
great.
me and the girl I was dating at the time were checking that website. But it was really, I was getting like some small encouragement, which was good enough to keep me going. And then got a job at ABC, working like a desk for ABC News prime time with Diane Sawyer. Um, and that was uh it was, just like a step closer to like doing something in media and doing
Yeah.
something creative. And it started out as just kind of answering phones and then eventually went into writing some things here and there. And then um wrote there was so this new executive producer came on, um, from she had been at Good Morning America, Shelley Ross, and she had this idea like the Daily Show was just hitting
Hmm.
like mainstream people's radar, and she was like, we should do a Daily Show. And everyone was like, that's a terrible idea. Like everybody in the company was like, that's a bad idea. Diane Sawyer was like, what are you doing? Why don't no. And she was like, no, we should, and it should be sung. There was this like British news thing called That Was the Week That Was.
Hmm.
um she wanted to like try that out on primetime live, like on a real news show. So everyone would like nobody wanted to touch it except for me because it was like, well, I want to write comedy. And so
Yeah.
I started writing that with like, very little experience. I went from like being a desk assistant to like writing this segment. It was not appreciated by the other like producers, but I ended up like getting to, um it was good experience. It was not good. It flopped.
Yeah.
People were like mad. um and then around that time, my friend Justin Drams, who we had like started that little like humor online blog, Kill the Widow, together.
Hmm.
He got hired to be the editor for a relaunch of Cracked magazine. And he was like, we need somebody to edit the website. Like, we think there will also be a website to this
Yeah.
magazine. It was like those days, it was that long ago that
Yeah.
the website was kind of an afterthought.
It has the secondary.
Yeah, it was a secondary. So like it was like the website started as like 50% of my job, and then I was also like working on the magazine. But it was also the place where like we got to do what we wanted, and
Hmm.
I got to publish what we wanted without kind of editorial oversight from
Yeah.
some of the people who had access to the money that was being used to relaunch the magazine. So it was just a more fun place than I think the magazine editorially. And slowly by slowly, like the magazine went away and the website, you know, I will say, like, I got really lucky because the website was not like there wasn't a lot of attention. We got a lot of like bites at the apple a
Yeah.
lot of failed articles like weren't that successful. And then, but like through a lot of guess and check, kind of figured out what was working, what was resonating with people. And also, like my favorite online comedy writer at that time was Jay Pinkerton, and we went out and got him to join the editorial staff. And then he was good friends and had worked with this guy David Wong,
Yep.
aka Jason Pargin. And so, there was a bunch of churn as the magazine failed. And then Jay got hired to go write um, video games, which he's had like a legendary career doing.
Mhm.
And so we got to bring Jason Pargin on as the editor, and that is, I think, when the site really kind of took off. And that was
Yeah.
also around the time when we got a like perfect article in from this college student, Dan O'Brien. And so I went and like met with him at like a chain restaurant in I think Jersey maybe. And then yeah, so we just got really lucky and got these two amazing geniuses on the staff like
Mhm.
early on, Dan
Yeah.
O'Brien and Jason Pargin, and then got acquired by this site or this company, Demand Media, and we were so far outside their business model that they again just kind of let us alone, and we
Mhm.
had a lot of opportunities to like try different things out and fail. And yeah, so I don't know, that was a very long answer, but that's how the cracked thing started.
No, it sounds like you guys were in that perfect spot of having investors and like corporate backing their
Yeah,
money, but none of their involvement in the day to day.
that's always been my sweet spot,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, is like finding a company that is like, oh, that's kind of interesting what you're doing, but then you are not like core to their
Yeah.
business model. And so like your successes are like kind of gravy.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure it's also like not not the best strategy. It's just like worked out for me to have like, you know, muddle through and have
Yeah.
like some fun projects that I've worked on is like, you don't cross their radar, like cause huge problems for them, and you get to try different things out and make some
Yeah.
fun content. Yeah.
Yeah. And it clearly paid off. Like I said, that was, obviously my intro to you. The site was massively successful, but also it's this weird thing where it became almost like this melting pot. Like I know Columbo is kind of talked about now, of like, hey, all these people got their start on Columbo, and like
Yeah.
here's how those things branched out. Or like for comedy, Golden Girls is one people always go back to, of like, hey, the writers on the Golden Girls are now the people that have created all your favorite comedy for the last 25, 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like for a lot of people, especially people like me, that's what Cracked was.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a
like,
good group for
well, I
sure.
mean, the bookshelf behind me, I've got Dan's book, I've got all of Jason's books, like I've got the new
Yeah.
textbook. Like the majority of the podcasts I listen to are mostly people who were at Cracked and then have gone on to do other things. So it's still
That's
so
great.
much of my entertainment ecosystem is people that were there.
Yeah. It was really fun. Like we're
Yeah.
working with like there were these editorial calls that I think I enjoyed more than anyone. Like, but it's also like what the Crack podcast was based on
Mhm.
was just like these 2 to 3 hour long editorial calls where we would take like read through the pitches from the online forum that like
Yeah.
really Jason built out of Pointless Waste of Time, the forum that he had created already. But like it was this thriving forum where we got like so many pitches from so many, new writers or like really accomplished writers, but and then just like kind of shaped them into articles in these meetings. And it's still like one of the most fun uh professional experiences I've had. And
Yeah.
like I'm trying to it went away for a while. I'm like trying to bring it back on the podcast, like on with my current job, because it is like I think good stuff comes out of just getting interesting people who are paying attention in a room
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, no, having a digital marketing background, so like the times when I have felt the most fulfilled or in quotes creative, I mean there's still so many, I'm playing with other people's money, so at the end of the day I still have to do what they want me to do.
Yeah.
But when I'm feeling the most fulfilled is when you have those moments where it's like, oh, we have all of our strategists and the account managers are sitting in a room and we're just gonna like throw ideas at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Like that is so much fun and so fulfilling, because there's no wrong answers in those
Yeah.
situations,
Yeah.
which gives you freedom to say the dumbest shit
Yeah.
imaginable to
Right.
see if, hey, is there a nugget in this that we can pull out. I
Yeah.
know I said it in the least eloquent way possible, and I said
Mm.
fuck too many times to actually use it with a client. But if we strip all that stuff away and it becomes something that is usable, I love that because there's an energy that comes with that that is a lot of fun. Like you said, it's a lot of
Yeah.
it's very fulfilling to be able to do that and kind of
Yeah.
just
It's just like
strip
a
everything
good,
away.
yeah. It's good to just like you just chase what is interesting to you,
Yeah,
just like as you're finding it in the moment. And like
yeah,
that, I think ends up being what a lot of my favorite podcasts do is, chasing, discovering what's interesting in the moment and then like kind of following that.
yeah.
Um, yeah. And then like a lot of research, which was obviously being put in by the writers on in the forum and stuff.
So as you were building that, and obviously it's not a one man show, but being the editor in chief, kind of the figurehead, how do you manage that and keep things on track? As like as you're pulling in not only the employees, but you've got all these other writers who are submitting work. It seems like it would be the most daunting job in the world to keep all of that together and to
Yeah, we
keep
had
people happy.
yeah.
Because it's stressful. Like it's nothing but deadlines, and deadlines are not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I mean, it was just like very so when I started the website, I had the goal of like one new piece of content a day,
Hmm.
and I was writing some of that and I was like reaching out to, just freelance writers, like people I would like read something on McSweeney's and be like, okay, that
Yeah,
person's good, find their contact information. And then as we got the forum, like we just expanded very slowly from like I
hmm.
still remember we were like a second piece of content a day. Like that's nuts. And then by the end, with video and the podcast and everything,
Yeah,
it was a whole thing. But it was growing slowly and only growing as fast as like our bandwidth would allow us to.
hmm,
And again, that was only possible because we were not like the focus of our parent company. We
yeah,
were in the background. And so we could grow at a rate that made sense. That was like kind of driven by us as opposed to driven by like top-down mandates of like,
yeah,
well, I mean, there certainly were top-down mandates, like, you know, of like, well, how do we scale this?
yeah.
Uh, in fact, like our parent company's whole thing was scale. And so
Yep.
a lot of our time was and like a lot of my management time in the early days was spent being the buffer between like bad ideas and like the people who are actually driving and creating like the really good content that
Yeah.
was driving our success. And but then there were also like good ideas that were coming from the parent company that so you just like wait for that good idea to come and then you're like, whoa, amazing idea,
Yeah.
sir. Sir. Even though it's like something that like you may have already come up with, like,
Yeah.
you just wait for them to come up with it. And then you're like, yes, wow, this could work. And
Yeah.
then,
And then that
jump on
keeps
that.
them off your back for a
Yeah.
quarter. No,
Yeah.
I'm familiar with I always refer to it as the 10Xification of everything. Of like
And
because
Xification. What a phrase. Jesus. Yeah.
look, marketing has destroyed my brain.
Yeah.
But like so much of what I go into is how do we 10x what we did last year? And
Yeah.
I understand why that would be a goal, but to me that's such a nonsensical thing to judge anything based on.
It's just a nice round number, the metric system.
Yeah,
Um,
of course. But then
Zach,
when
I've enjoyed the conversation so far, but how do we 10x this from this point forward and just take it to that next decimal point?
well,
How do we
good
move?
news.
Let's
I,
bump
I'm
that decimal point over one spot.
I'm
Zach.
about to pitch you on my 12-point system to 10xify your life. Let me
Shit.
start. Jack,
It's
what
got a
time do you
12
wait?
point system?
Yeah,
Damn.
12-point
On
system to
his grind.
10x your life.
By the way, I did come on here expecting this to be a grind set mindset podcast. Grinding to a halt. Hell
See,
yeah, dog.
but that's good marketing. That's how I get people
That's
in.
right.
So the root of this came from I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, which is like the saddest place in the world you can spend your time.
Yeah.
Um, I say that as someone who has reached out to them multiple times, like, "Hey, you want to buy my show?" But also, there's so many, especially in marketing, the guys that are like, "Hey, this is how you again 10x your life. Like you only made $200,000 last year. Like, what are
10x your
you?"
life. I
Yeah.
love it.
So then it's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, here's my course on how to be successful," and it's a
Hmm.
guy that and a majority of my background is in automotive. So it's a guy that 2 years ago was selling cars at like a used car dealership, and then he rebranded as a life coach.
Yeah.
And it's all about that grind set mindset. And I'm like,
Hmm.
first off, I hate that.
Yeah.
Uh, but also my viewpoint on it is as someone who has gotten to the point of extreme burnout in my role where I've had to step away from jobs because I knew that I was getting to a point where if I continued at the rate I was, just due to where my mental health was, it would cause me to end my life because that's just the point I was at.
Yeah.
And so, like, as I started thinking about things that way and started being more vocal about mental health in the workplace, I started getting really good traction with people of like, yeah, nobody talks about like you work in digital marketing. There's this expectation that you'll be at an agency for 16 months and then you go to the next agency because they'll pay you $20,000 a year more. And every
Right.
16 months, you just do that because it's all about the money. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
You work 60 hours a week. Who cares? Um,
Jesus.
it's brutal. Marketing is a brutal industry and it burns people out really quick. So I was like, well, I want to have conversations with people that are successful in the jobs that they have, whether they find those jobs, fulfilling or not, but also how do they find time to still be a person while pursuing career goals and also
Yeah.
keep their mental health in check, uh, which is a good way to segue into my next question. But that's kind of where all of this came from and why I picked the name. Again, being a marketing guy, I constantly think of like branding is my favorite part of marketing. That to me is the most fun. So like I
Hmm.
will think of puns and wordplay. And I had said somebody should start a podcast called Grinding to a Halt and just like mentioned it to my wife. And normally none of those things get a reaction from her because she puts up with this bullshit all day long.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh no, that one's actually good." And I was like, "Oh,
She did what I
yeah.
to you what I did to my manager.
Yeah. So
Just
I was
waited
like,
for the one good idea and then
yeah.
encourage. Yeah.
Well, the
Um,
joke's on her because 4 weeks later, the first episode came out. Because I was like, oh, obviously I have to do this now.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
but
funny.
that,
I have an idea that I'm working on, like in the background that is mainly like I believe in the idea, but I believe in a lot of my ideas. But
mhm,
the idea is mainly interesting to me because my wife was like, "That's a good idea," and
yeah.
she usually doesn't. Yeah, it's a great sounding board.
Well, no, I've
To
been
have.
with her for 15 years. So, like,
Yeah,
she knows the shit that I'm up to at all times. And she knows when to tune out the stuff that is not worth anyone's time.
yeah,
So, when it is that nugget of like, hey, yeah, I like that, or you should pursue that, then it tells me, oh, I'm definitely onto something because
yeah,
she is my biggest supporter, but also rightfully so, my biggest critic.
yeah. It's good to have. I
um,
always think of that. Have you ever seen The Death of Stalin?
yeah,
The Khrushchev's like relationship with his wife, like always, it's like my number one relationship goal is like to just be able like at the end of the thing, he comes home and he reviews everything. Like he's like, I'm not gonna remember this tomorrow. So like
yeah.
here's all the drunken shit that
Here's
happened. So yeah, so that we can like have a hive mind so that I don't get killed by Stalin. Um so I don't know if it's a number one relationship goal, but it was
yeah,
just a I loved that detail that he
yeah.
was just like, all right, so you are my sober mind right now. You need to remember all of this stuff that I'm gonna forget because I'm
That's great.
drunk from a Stalin drinking game. Yeah.
It's a great movie. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
But that gets me to the midway point and a question I always like to ask, and I think you're in a very unique position because TDZ is it is a comedy podcast, but you're talking about the news and it gets very heavy. How do you maintain a level of sanity, but also mental health? Because you've talked at times on the show, been like, yeah, the last couple weeks have been, mental health wise, not great. How do you balance, still being a person and being able to turn all that off and like be a husband and a dad? And
Yeah.
there's months at a time of that show, especially in like mid 2020 through 2021, where it was just brutal some days listening to it because there were so many bad things happening.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you how do you manage that? How do you kind of turn that part off or find ways to counteract all the horrible things that you have to talk about for I mean legitimately 10 hours a week for the show?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I don't have a great answer
Mhm.
for that, like other than, some meditation, some I definitely had a much worse solution to it before I like stopped drinking.
Yeah.
In like that was actually before TDZ. There's meditation, there's like just listening to other people and like kind of focusing on other people, like I
Mhm.
guess deprioritizing my own happiness and like prioritizing other people's happiness selfishly, because by doing that you actually you know can be a little bit I don't know. I find that that's the only way that I can maintain anything
Yeah.
close to sanity, is just by focusing on other people and not asking the question of like, how do I do this? Like how this
Mhm.
is, so it's but yeah, I mean it's been there's been tough weeks, tough months doing a news show and trying to like keep it honest to
Yeah.
what we feel and what we're going through, so that it's not just like, and now on to the new, on to
Yeah.
sports, which is kind of, the hope is that it's not um supposed to be like a news show that is not like format and
Yeah.
just driving through the things in an artificial way, but like actual human beings experiencing the news with you.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I mean there's been some dark times, but like also just like focusing on the people in my life, like when I'm not on mic, like uh just having kids at this very specific stage that I've been
Mhm.
at, of like I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and just you can't really like plan things out with them, so you
Yeah.
just have to be in the moment and
It,
reactive,
yep.
I
It's a
guess.
fully reactionary
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, yeah. You're just like kind of all right, and now we're making rockets out of like film canisters and Alka-Seltzer. I didn't know that's what we were going to be doing, but like um yeah. So just trying to like be the best I can be at serving other people in my life, or
Mhm.
focusing on them, not even like thinking of it as like service, but
Yeah.
just trying to keep my head space like in, okay, what are they going through, unless like what how do I feel about this? And that's
Yeah.
something that I'm just perfect at by any
Mhm.
means, and is a struggle, but that is something that I feel like has helped me, as I've been doing this show for 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not a great answer to that one. It's a tough one. And like,
Yeah.
I mean, the one of the reasons that I left ABC News at the time that I left was like I was hanging out with the other news producers, and they were talking about like, they're like, ah, Dan Rather 84 is my favorite like year of any news anchor. Like they were like super news junkies. And I was just like, oh man, I don't have this. Like I
Yeah.
don't have whatever. bug they have that
Yeah.
makes them love the news. And so I don't have that like drive to dig into or like watch the news, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just I'm more driven by the news is like a way to come into contact with interesting ideas.
Yeah.
Um, but some days it's not giving me any, And so then we just make it dumb and silly, and hopefully Miles is interested in something that's happening.
You guys always do find that good balance of if it's heavy, you let it be heavy. You don't underplay it, but then you also, like you said, don't just then immediately throw it to weather. And then there's like this tonal shift that is abrasive.
Yeah. Although
Even if
now that I've said it, I kind of think that we should start throwing it to weather every time it gets too heavy. And now to Jack on the weather. I'm just throwing to myself. Um, yeah.
and then it's not that your answer isn't a good answer. It's so specific to everyone. I'm really bad at finding happiness within myself. I'm a very naturally just an introverted person.
Yeah.
Being outgoing is something I learned to do for my job. But at the end of the day, I need to like shut everything down and just be quiet. Like I don't want to be outgoing. I don't want to go hang out with anybody. I mean, I moved from a metro area to the middle of the woods in Maine. So like for me, it's great
Oh,
to not be
nice.
around people. But similar to you, like if my kids are happy, that's really where I find my source of happiness, or
Yeah.
acts of service of like if I know the things I'm doing is making my wife or my kids' lives better, then I find happiness in that in ways that I can't find happiness within myself normally.
Yeah.
Because I struggle to just in general feel happiness. It's just not something I intuitively have within me.
Yeah. We've talked on TZ about the idea that like one of the things that's missing from the modern world is like bowling leagues, like this
Yeah,
thing that like people used to have a bowling team. Like
yeah,
everybody was fucking bowling for some reason. Because and I mean the reason is because they were like, no, it's just like known, it's kind of just assumed that like we need this time with people in our
yeah,
community. We need like physical community. And so um something that I've started doing like kind of slowly and by accident is like like being the Cub Scout leader for my kindergartner
yeah.
is like sometimes it can be stressful because I'm not like naturally good at I don't think anyone's naturally good at dealing like wrangling 12 5-year-olds, but
No,
it's that has been like that's a fun thing for me to do or
yeah,
just like a rewarding thing for me to do when I'm done work at the end of the day is like what can I do with 12 5-year-olds like in 2 weeks, like
yeah,
what can I come up with or like what can I reach out to the other parents and like can I give them some ideas of like some fun stuff to do, and
mhm,
it's totally not something that I would have seen myself doing
yeah,
even 2 years ago, but it's just something that I like fell into because I was like, well, I don't really have a natural mechanism for like getting out into nature with my kids. I like to like go on hikes with them, but
yeah,
if there was some activity that like got us outside together, that'd be great. So we joined Cub Scouts. I never did it growing up. Um,
mhm,
and then they needed somebody to lead like the kindergartners this year. So, but it's like one of those old things that's like been around for a long time
yeah,
and exists for a reason, even though like sometimes it's just like going and playing Mother May I or like red light, green light in a room with
yeah,
like a bunch of kids and like their parents looking on, being like, why are we here? you know? Like, because it's this or a bowling league, guys.
yeah,
It's this or church. So
yeah. I grew up like extremely religious.
yeah.
So church was it for me. I was
Yeah.
homeschooled, so like church was the only outlet. That was how I knew the world was
Oh
through
wow.
church. Working remote, and then I'm in no ways affiliated with any religions now, I have found that same thing of like, oh, all those like built-in interactions in person with people that I used to have are now gone because
Yeah.
I'm in this room by myself in my basement for 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
I go to the gym in the morning, but like I don't want to talk to anybody at the gym. I
No.
want to put on
Oh
my
God,
headphones.
no.
I hate
You're
gym
not a
talkers.
psychopath. Yeah.
No, also I'm like I antagonize other people at the gym. There was a bunch
Yeah.
of anti-trans talk at one
Yeah.
point in the gym, so I started wearing protect trans kids shirts
Nice.
to the gym just so they know don't talk to me, but also
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't fuck with your shit.
Yeah.
But like I don't want to talk then, so trying to find ways to be in a community
Yeah.
is difficult, and as I get older, it will only be more difficult. I guess bowling's it. I'm gonna have to take a bowling.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like some, I think I got some of it from, their like meetings for, people who are trying to stop drinking or like doing
Yeah.
that. Like those are everywhere and like always like just like they informally spring up and they make you good at like being around people who you wouldn't normally
Yeah.
spend a lot of time with.
Hmm.
Which in turn like made me, I don't know. I think just like a little less scared of people, even if the people are like, you know, not in, it don't seem to exist in the same world that I exist in,
Yeah.
politically or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I going back to something you said earlier, talking about, being, like a nervous 20-year-old waiting tables.
Hmm.
Uh so how was that transition for you of being someone who was more behind the scenes to obviously at Cracked you were hosting the podcast, you're in videos, it is you and Miles on TDZ.
Yeah.
Like has that transition been difficult for you to kind of learn that skill set to be a very forward facing person, or did it kind of organically happen naturally?
Yeah. It kind of organically happened. It was definitely difficult at first to, like I just had I was much more comfortable like adding jokes to other people's stuff than like
Yeah.
writing jokes for myself. And then slowly I just like what kind of wanted more and more to like be able to like have the freedom to write my own voice and,
Hmm.
create something. Uh, and yeah, there were times where I was like, is this selfish? Like, is this a selfish drive? Like, why am I doing this? But creatively it just was kind of more fulfilling to have that option as well to like
Yeah.
be part of something. But I feel like I need both. Like I need to be able to work with other people on their ideas and also to have the freedom to like create something that's
Hmm.
in my voice. That it was like I had told myself at a certain point that I couldn't talk well enough on to like be on a podcast. I was a huge fan of podcasts, but I said and a lot. I still do.
Yeah.
And uh that's that was the thing that stopped me from launching a podcast for a couple years. And then I reached out to somebody I met at Earwolf and eventually developed the Cracked podcast with them. But the first episode, I don't even want to go back and listen to because I edited myself so brutally. So it probably sounds so weird and unnatural and not like a human speaking.
Yeah.
Um, the there was a lot of struggles with self-confidence and
Hmm.
yeah, in those early days, and then just slowly getting more and more comfortable with it. But I've said the word slowly probably 20 times in this conversation because that is how I do things and how I kind of gravitate. My career is the process of figuring out what I want to do
Yeah.
for a living. I figure it out by doing different things and like finding the thing that works or doesn't work. And the just slowly by slowly I figure things out, but it's never uh, like well planned out in advance. Just kind of going by feel, what feels right, what people seem to respond to is,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, my approach is different in that I do everything very quickly. Because if I think about it too much, I know I'll back down and I won't
sure.
follow through.
Yeah,
But
that's
I am
better.
very
By the way, yours is better for the listener. That's the better way to do it.
I also tend to get in over my head
Yeah,
that way, where I will be like, oh no, I can figure out, career wise, I can figure out how to do this job.
yeah,
And then I get in the job and I'm like, well, fuck, I got into digital marketing and like day one was sitting down with one of the other account managers and he was like, so what do you know about PPC? And I was like, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about PPC.
yeah. I was
I could,
lying.
I can't tell you what that means.
Yeah,
And so like literally started from zero and had to quickly learn how to do all the things I had lied about knowing how to do.
yeah,
Um, but I like learning that way. But I also always feel like an imposter. And similar to like talking about editing yourself so heavily in the first episode, I'm still very much in an
yeah,
stage as I like figure out how to do this. The first interview I did for the show was with Dr. John Paul, and
yeah,
they were so kind and so forgiving as I was like figuring out how to do this. I was like, I'll be honest, you are my very first interview. This is I'm sorry I wasted this on you. And they were like, no, it's fine. Like you're gonna do great.
yeah,
The conversation feels natural. It feels okay.
yeah,
And they're like, and it'll get better.
yeah,
It'll the next 10 will be better than the first 10, and that's what you need to focus on.
yeah,
But as I am editing every episode, I'll be like, fuck, I say so much.
yeah. Yeah, editing yourself is brutal, but I think you also learn
Yeah.
the, the more you hear yourself say the more the ums fall away.
Mhm.
And I would probably say a lot less if I was still editing myself. But I for my own mental health, I don't do that. But the yeah, faster is I do want to say doing things slowly and very self-critically is not what I'm saying I recommend. That I would
Oh
say
yeah, yeah.
that is like the not not the way to go. And like so with the Crack podcast, first episode took me 4 or 5 months to put together,
Mhm.
brainstorm, try different things, like all these different things. It was this kind of convoluted mess of an episode with we cut together out of like 12 different interviews. I was like, it's gonna be like Radio Lab and This American
Yeah.
Life, and it's editing and sound design are going to be a big part of it. And then the fourth episode, we were like, we'll do like a quick one that's just based off of this fun thing that we talked about in the editorial meeting today. And Jason and I, or Michael Swaim and I, got on the phone and
Mhm.
had a phone conversation for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that it was like, oh, this is what the podcast can be.
Yeah.
This is what actually works about the podcast. And so it was the faster, easier way was the better way to go for
Yeah.
me. But it's a matter of figuring out what the thing is. And everything, like when I've written something, the thing that just comes out and I'm not like, oh, this is brilliant, or this was like,
Mhm.
I have to like puzzle my way through it. The thing that comes out quickly is usually the thing that ends up being the best.
Yeah.
So faster, we should all aspire to be like Zach, is what I'm saying.
There are times it has worked out so well, and other times where I've just had to be like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna have to leave this job. It turns out I am incapable of any of these things. So it's hit or miss. I would say think about things while you're doing them, and that's kind of the thing I had to learn, where I would just blindly power through, without the foresight to be like, hey, this might come back to bite me in the ass, and in 6 months when they figure out I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm having a childcare situation.
No, you're good.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. at least once an episode when I record during the day, you will hear there's like stomping because my daughter's like bounding down the steps. It just happened. So
Yeah.
it's the way it goes. It's the fun of doing this from home,
Yeah.
and the fun of being a parent who also
Yeah.
is involved with your kids' lives.
Yeah. Yeah. How old's your daughter?
She's 8, and my son is about to be 12. I had my kids very early. Very,
Wow.
yeah.
Nice.
Again,
Um,
that goes back to rushing into things. I met my
you
wife.
do everything fast. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
I met my wife, and then within 6 months we were married. I was 19. Not the way to do it. Uh, so we just had our 15th wedding anniversary.
yeah. We are on our 16th, I think.
Mhm.
We're coming up on 16 this year, but we got married pretty young, but
Mhm.
less young than you guys for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I tell people like that it should be illegal. 19-year-olds should not should not be allowed to get married. Like
yeah,
your brain's not done cooking.
yeah, yeah,
You don't know what you're doing.
yeah.
But that is like the prime example I give people when they ask how I do things. I'm like, oh no, this is the example of me rushing in, but also the example of my follow through.
Right.
Of
There you go.
I will rush into this, but then I'm gonna make it work. Oh, I wanted to go back to in the little bit of research I did. This is not a research heavy show in any way. I
Good.
went back and I read
Got a
the
lot to hide. No, I'm just joking.
so anyway, I've got your social. And so I went back and I read like the farewell article on Cracked when you were leaving, and it was
Yeah.
just like everybody talking about what it was like working with you. And and that
Nightmare. Right? There was
yeah,
some stuff. There was some bad stuff in there,
it was
man.
yeah, yeah. It was mostly it just said redacted for most of
Yeah.
it.
Well, I still had some power before I left, so I wasn't gonna let them.
Yeah, you still had editorial.
That's right.
Yeah, which is good. That's what I wanted to talk about. How do you control people, but then also control the narrative?
Thank
No,
you.
but like leadership style is important, and leadership is such a buzzword, especially in the world I come from, where people are like paid leadership coaches, and there's some that are very legitimate, and then there's others like I said that were lower level car salesmen 2 years ago, and now they've rebranded themselves as leadership coaches. So I wanted to ask about the way you lead, but also the way you were talked about was very much that you were super hands on and very focused on like the individual growth of every person. And that's not the way most people lead. So like is that something intuitive to you or something you learned as you were coming up in Cracked of like hyper focusing on the person and their skill set but also helping them develop their skill set?
Yeah. It's leadership is tricky for me. Like my dad is a basketball coach who is like a natural leader, and reads a lot of things about leadership and like thinks about it very analytically about how to, you know, work with people and be a leader. And he has recommended and like sent me a lot of books on leadership that I am never like, they never really resonate with me. Like the
Yeah.
words just like fall out of my head.
Same. I can't do business books. I can't do leadership books. I can't do marketing books.
Yeah.
It's impossible for me to read those.
Yeah. I think the main thing that uh like I'm very open to the idea that I don't know what I'm talking about, you
Yeah.
know? And um I think that serves me well when working with people is that like I'm always open to the fact that like I am like in no way like guaranteed to be right about something more
Yeah.
so than them, and that like beginners like, so somebody who's like coming at a situation fresh might have much better instincts than me because they don't have like all the calloused over like
Yeah.
experiences that are, you know, can can be outdated like immediately,
Yeah.
especially on like something like online content. So um and then, you know, getting a lot of experience publishing things that didn't work to
Yeah.
then find the stuff that did work. Um, I did have, you know, a lot of built up kind of instincts that I thought could help people. So it's just really being conscious of like where I didn't know anything, which was like most places, and
Mhm.
then the very few places where like my experience what like did offer beneficial kind of institutional knowledge that I
Yeah.
could like help them navigate. But mainly, yeah, just not, I don't know if I was very hands-on. That's interesting that that's what came from the article, because I feel like I was pretty like I in a lot of cases the thing like the insight that I had as a leader was like, holy shit, Jason Pargin, Daniel O'Brien, like these people, Michael Swaim are like really great, and I can just knowing when to just let them
Yeah.
do their thing. Um,
Yeah, no, it came across not hands-on in like a micromanagement, I'm the
yeah.
boss of all this way, but in that there was one person who talked about coming in for an interview and like you were the person that greeted them at the door. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't like they came in and talked to a secretary and then sent you upstairs or whatever it may be. But like you were always the person they could go to if something needed to be worked out, that you were there to assist in every way. So
Hmm.
hands-on in that you were
Yeah, yeah,
involved
totally.
that way, that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
were a resource, not a
Yeah, yeah.
hindrance in the way a lot of hands-on bosses are.
Sure, 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 sure. Yeah. I don't know who that was who came in for an interview and I was there, but that might have been purely accidental, but I did. I was there a lot though.
Hey,
So,
but it's a happy accident that seemed to work out because
yeah.
it stuck out in their mind, you know?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Just being aware of like when people were really good and then just knowing when to let them loose would be,
Yeah.
and being lucky enough to have like come into contact with people who were really good was a big part of it, I think.
I mean, knowing good talent when you see it is very much a skill set.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
for sure.
all right. I know we're running up on time. You do like 15 podcasts a week, dude. Like I was not expecting you to say yes because all you do is podcasts.
I only do 9 podcasts a week. It's not that
Oh, you
big a
guys have
deal.
scaled it back. You've
Yeah,
scaled
we
it
scaled it
back.
back a little bit. I think that's right. Yeah. Or maybe 10. But
That's still
yeah, man.
that's a
No,
lot. That's a lot of podcasts.
yeah. I'm just really grateful for, the Zeit Gang, and for, you and everybody who's like kind of created this great culture around our show. I feel it's a place where I feel very fortunate to just sit back and be like, man, we are very lucky that these are the people who our show kind of resonates with, and
Yeah.
it's an awesome community. So really appreciate you doing what you do as part of the community, and also asking me to be on this podcast, man. It's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
No, of course. Yeah, I reached out to Joe Rogan, but he said no. So
What?
I know. I
Rogan. I mean,
know.
that guy's
Yeah.
gotten a big head in many, many ways.
Yeah, it's the HGH. It'll do it to you.
Yeah. Holy shit. I'm like worried it's gonna pop, you know?
What if that does happen though? Like mid episode, his head
Right.
just explodes because it's concerning to
Yeah.
see. Uh,
And I think we're gonna start doing like more video content for
mhm.
TDZ, at least like
Yeah,
a YouTube video episode a week,
yeah,
is the thing at this point. And I do think that I'm going to like seeing myself on camera, I'm going to start wanting to take HGH. And so that's something you can look forward to from me, is just increased head size physically, as I
perfect. Yeah,
just want to, yeah.
up until this point I've been a one man show, but I did have a friend who's a graphic designer and edits video, and he was like, "Dude, if you need any help, let me know." So he's gonna come on board, and we're gonna start doing more video content.
Yeah.
And I was like, "But now I'm gonna have to like see myself
Yeah.
so much more." It's
Yeah.
bad enough hearing my voice, but if I have to look at myself while
Right.
it's
Maybe
gonna be
get an
brutal.
editor for that, because otherwise, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
oof.
it's gonna be
Um,
awful.
yeah, I do not like hearing myself or looking at myself, and yet I create reams of content every week. So,
It's a
uh,
self-made prison, Jack.
that's
Self-made
right.
prison.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Um, Amazing. Well, Zach,
Well,
thank you so
yeah,
much for having me,
no,
man.
appreciate it. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jack.
Thank you.